So really, a buyer twin is just the evolution of what we used to call personas. Personas were that slide deck with the image and a couple of facts, and they would go in a dock that would sit in a drive for 5 years and never be looked at. A twin is an evolution of that. It is interactive. It leverages AI. It adapts and evolves.
Welcome to the Buyer-Centric OS. Buyer-Centric OS, a system for revolutionary customer experience. With your hosts, Andy Halko and Tony Zayas. This show helps you turn guesswork into growth by putting your buyer at the center of everything.
All right, so in today's episode here on the Buyer-Centric Operating System, we're going to shift gears a little bit. We're moving into the third part of the book, and that is called the transformation. And so I'll just read kind of what's here at the start of this, just to introduce it. The first two parts challenge your mindset and introduce the model, but knowing is not enough. This part is about doing. Expect to change of tone, less conceptual, more tactical, less why, more how. So with that, Andy, I'm going to ask you a question just to bring us back to where we were kind of left off. And you say that growth doesn't stall overnight, it drifts. How does that drift sneak up on companies before they realize it?
Yeah, we've hinted at this a little bit before, but, a company doesn't come in and say, we're not going to be customer centric. They don't, just wake up and all of a sudden they don't understand their customers. What happens is little moments over time where, whether it's you're adding red tape into the organization and you have to go through a bunch of hoops. And by the time you're through a couple of those hoops, whatever you started with that maybe you thought about the customer didn't end there. A great example is software development. You create a feature and you say, we keep hearing from users that we need a search that does this. And then all of a sudden a UX person comes in. And then, another person comes in from customer support, another person comes in, and that feature that actually gets launched is much different than what the original user asked for.
Right.
That's kind of the drift, is it happens all across the organization, whether it's red tape, whether it's people with strong opinions, whether it's just being out of date because you haven't talked to customers directly in a year, that you just slowly drift away. Again, it's just not an overnight thing. It just happens that you drift.
Right. And as you explain it, it makes a ton of sense when you have different influences coming in. It's kind of a natural progression. Moving into the topic, and this is how it will apply is my next step here. But for anyone that is new to the concept, what exactly is a buyer twin? And why does a buyer twin need guardrails?
Yeah, so the whole premise of what being buyer-centric is or customer-centric is about building a better organization because you know your buyer better than anyone else. You can create great products, marketing that resonates, etc. Well, the number one thing that you have to do to accomplish that is understand the buyer. And right. So really a buyer twin is just the evolution of what we used to call personas. Personas were that slide deck with the image and a couple of facts, and they would go in a dock that would sit in a drive for 5 years and never be looked at. A twin is an evolution of that. It is interactive. It leverages AI. It adapts and evolves. And to your point of guardrails, the guardrails are actually what make it a twin, or what help it evolve from a persona to an actual twin. And there's 6 to 7 different things that you can apply to your buyer understanding to actually turn them into a twin, into something that truly represents your target buyer. And so we can walk through a couple of those.
Yeah, I was going to say we have I believe it's 6 guardrails that are defined. And I just want to talk a little bit further about those boundaries being so critical to keep that twin accurate and useful?
Yeah, the first guardrail is really about segmentation. You really can't do anything without narrowing down audiences and making them very segmented. As a great example is if you said, well, our audience is manufacturing firms from 100 to 500 employees. Well, who are the roles within that? That's segmentation, is breaking it up by, who the specific buyers are. The other is segmentation by industry or size, is that we don't just do manufacturing, but it's, oil manufacturing between 10 and 50 employees, and it's, parts manufacturing between 50 and 100. It's really about creating much more specific audience groups by size, industry, department, age, whatever it is in B2B or B2C, and then into title and role, so that we're really, to be a twin, what we can't do is be generic and we can't be wide. To create a real true twin, we have to be hyper specific about who we're targeting.
And it may be kind of obvious to some people, but why do we want to stay away from the generic twin?
Well, it just doesn't work. I mean, that's the biggest thing, is that, the way that a CEO at a manufacturing firm and a CIO think are different. Their objectives are different. If you do this research of creating a twin, you'll see that everything, the pains that they experience every day, the motivations and what they're trying to accomplish, the people that they have to answer to, what their true job objectives are. And then break that up. If you're targeting manufacturing and it's mid-market, a data analyst is different than a project manager, is different than this. And then once you get out of the industry and you go even a healthcare CIO to a manufacturing CIO,
totally different.
And so when we actually want to create products that resonate with their pains, we want to create marketing campaigns that catch their attention, we want to do sales that close. If we're just acting broadly and we're designing all of those things for the general audiences, we're just much less likely to be successful.
Makes a lot of sense.
The next one in the guardrails is really one source of truth. So this is kind of the evolution in a persona that what we typically saw was a slide deck where you had 2 or 3 of these somewhat generic, because people usually did only do 2 to 3, maybe 4. They didn't do 10 or 20, which you should to be a twin. But what happens in that deck is that marketing has a version, sales has a version, product has a version. They get out of date, people copy them, they get moved around, they get stored on your local, and you might make a change, or whatever it is. What we want to see with a twin is a source of truth. One that our sales team, our customer service, product development, marketing, leadership all go to, and it's all the same. They may interact with it differently, right, but the core twin is universal across them. And then as they learn and things get updated, it becomes that one source of truth that they can all access.
Yeah, and on that point, the one source of truth, I think that is something that for me, across teams, departments, usually customers are viewed very differently. And to your point of they may interact with them differently, but I think of the information that you get through the twin as context. So sales interacting with the buyer is going to be talking to different challenges and pains. Customer service might be different, but for them to have that awareness of the other aspects that make that twin up, it can be really important for how the interaction goes and the effectiveness. But I think it also helps teams just with internal alignment in looking at anything that is being implemented.
It's that word truth, right? Is that what you want is truth. And so whether you're marketing, whether you're sales, what you don't want is each team in your organization have a different truth. that product is building off of their version of what the truth of what the buyer looks like and what they want, but then marketing's going out and trying to capture those same audience members for that product, but they're working from different truth. And so that can be where organizations start diverging, that, slowly, again, that drift over time. Product is building for one audience, marketing is speaking to another. And then by the time, those leads come in and do a demo, they're like, this isn't what I wanted. And
that opens up opportunity, because when you have that more comprehensive awareness, you can be better at marketing. You can serve, the customer through customer service better. Sales could be more effective. But I think that's really what it opens up is more of a comprehensive awareness that we're dialing in with the twins. So
for sure. So the next guardrail that I think is important and kind of builds off of one source of truth is refresh or decay. The guardrail is that we have to keep this information fresh.
Right.
One of the things that, again, with personas that I've seen over the years, create that slide deck and use it for a long time and never change it. Even if you talk to a customer, the organization, they get feedback, they don't go back to that deck and update it.
Right.
So by the time the next person uses the deck, whatever they learned from that customer likely was not reflected in that persona. And so what we really have to do is create a cadence of improving this information, of going out and forcing ourselves to learn more about our audience and incorporate it into the twin on a regular basis, every 3 months. And then there's certain ways to do that. And I talk about that a lot in the book, is how do you create cadence behind this idea of not just on a whim saying, oh, what did our customer say? Or putting a feedback widget on your site and hoping that you get some good information. It's more about creating a systematic approach that has frequency and tactical action to gather feedback and then incorporate that back into the twin. And that's really the only way that long-term you're going to be successful.
So you're basically saying don't rely on all that work we did back in 2006.
Yeah, and it's funny, over the years I've seen companies do that. I mean, I remember I got brought in on a consulting gig where the last time they had talked about their product as a company was 10 years ago. And literally, it was just an unbelievable experience that really, as an organization, they had not sat down and talked about in years, because they had done pretty well. Right. And I think that is one of those drift moments, is when the company's doing well, it's easy to drift away.
Right.
This company had been doing pretty well, but then things started to change and they started to plateau, and they brought me in to say, how do we get out of this plateau? And that was one of the first places is, you guys haven't had a real detailed, honest conversation about who your customer is in 10 years. And that's how they got to the plateau.
Right.
The other one is pressure testing everything. What we really want to do is make sure we're using this twin to interact with, that when we are deciding to create a feature, when we're launching a campaign, we're creating an ad, we're building a landing page, we're creating proposals. Are we going back to that twin, and are we leveraging it in that process? Again, the old way was really just do it ad hoc, randomly. If you want to have a twin, you have to use it, and you have to use it every time that you have an interaction. Good.
No, I was just going to say, what do we have next? Is that ritualized reflection?
Yeah, ritualized reflection, really just making sure that, again, that process of creating rituals, of going back and looking at it internally. We've got mandated across the organization. Again, these kind of fit together a little bit, but mandating it is saying, hey, sales, you must look at these personas. Marketing, you have to use it this way. And then kind of a bonus one is on board with twins from day one. And one of the things that I talk about is really the first time an employee comes in new and fresh, this should be part of that key conversation. Who do we target? Why do they, care about what they do? What are their challenges and pains? What do they want to hear about? That one source of truth, that refreshed source of truth, that pressure testing. Well, the first day that a new employee comes in, whatever department, I really think that you should start with them being educated on who is it that we are trying to build for or influence or close. And so for me, a twin is that evolution of making sure that we really incorporate it from the moment a person becomes part of our organization.
Right. Makes a lot of sense. And, the concept of the twin, super interesting. All this stuff makes sense. And not to pitch or anything, but, how do you deliver twins to a client as an example?
Yeah. I mean, again, I think, this is such a huge part of my philosophy that you have to understand your audience to be successful. And that's what drove the fact that I built a platform called Buyer Twin, where you can actually do this really easily. You can follow all of these guardrails because it's a platform where it creates a single source of truth. It makes it easy to refresh information. It makes it easy for you to use it as a pressure test and interactive, so that if you're creating a new message, you're building a new page, you can actually interact with that twin. So really the product Buyer Twin that I've been working on for a while is the creation of this philosophy and these guardrails, and actually building a tool that makes it a no-brainer, that makes it something that it's not difficult to follow. And so if we go back to the beginning and say our customer, our buyer, is the most important thing to our success, it drives everything that we do. And if we have to have twins to be able to do that, we have to understand our audience. We have to follow these guardrails to do it right. What we can have is a product that makes it easy to do that. And it all comes back around to really being a catalyst for growth.
Right. And if you're interested in checking out, it's just buyertwin.com. Take a look. There is a 14-day trial that's available there. But to recap and wrap up today, Andy, if someone's listening and they only remember one guardrail, which is the one that you think is a good starting point, maybe that first domino that helps the others fall?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's refresh, right? For me, the biggest thing, and I told this story about the consulting, is organizations that let their personas or their buyers or their information about their market decay, that they're not keeping it fresh, keeping it alive. So however you do it, that is one of the most important things and can make your team successful, is that you are really having up-to-date, accurate information that can really support every action that your organization is taking. Excellent.
Well, if you have not checked out the book already, the Buyer-Centric Operating System is available on Amazon and elsewhere. Go check it out. I believe you hit the top selling couple of categories there, so which is pretty cool. But everyone, check us out. Again, Buyer-Centric Operating System, and also buyertwin.com to learn more about that platform that we use to build out the twins. And we will see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for tuning into the Buyer-Centric OS. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and grab your copy of the Buyer-Centric Operating System by Andy Halko, available now on Amazon. For more tools and insights, visit andyhalko.com.